Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. Whether you are buying for yourself or your business, here you will find tips, techniques and knowledge to support your journey to buying smart. Interviewing business owners and technical experts to give you information and guidance before parting with your money. Save money, time and get what you want when you want it. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, David Barr.
Hello and welcome to The Real Life Buyer. In this episode, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Julie Lawal. I have known Julie for many years and she has been a friend of my wife's since they were about 10 years old. Julie and I are both qualified purchasing professionals, have a very similar outlook on life and drive for self-improvement. So we can easily spend hours discussing and debating many subjects. It has been this drive for further improvement that has led Julie on a journey to more than the day job, to start an online retail business, publish her award-winning book, and launch her own coaching business. So, without further ado, I warmly welcome Julie to the show. Hello, Julie.
Hello, Dave. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm absolutely thrilled to be a guest on your podcast show today.
Excellent. Well, it's very unusual for us not to have a glass of wine chatting in the conservatory, but here we are in COVID, so we shall we'll crack on in this unusual way. So here we go. You certainly have and are leading a very busy life. And through this journey, you have experienced more than your fair share of personal setbacks and challenges. Would you mind talking us through a top slice of your story from becoming a qualified purchasing professional through to the present day?
Sure. So within 2 years after graduating from university, I started what I would call my first proper job as a buyer, and that was for a small firm based in Bedford. It was during my tenure with this company that I got the purchasing bug, and they supported me to begin my SIPS certification. So attending college part-time and then studying in the evenings and weekends. And then a few years later, and with MSIPS qualification under my belt, different doors opened. And for the next decade, I progressed into senior procurement roles in the big blue chip companies, spanning the media, electronics, and pharmaceuticals industries. And I really relished the opportunities that opened up for me, working with and learning from some very smart people in industry. And I applied what I observed to develop my own success blueprint in the world of procurement and procurement operations. And I absolutely loved it. Then one day, it kind of just suddenly dawned on me what was happening in my life. My career was on track, check. I traveled the world for work and for play, another check. I had the swanky sports coupe of my dreams, and I lived in a beautiful bachelorette apartment. A bachelorette apartment that was beautiful, but one that I returned to after every single business trip empty. And I don't mean that I got robbed. I realized that not only was I on the shelf in dating terms, having focused on my career for about 10 years straight, but at risk of slipping off the shelf entirely. So to avoid that happening, I turned my attention towards my personal life and just got out there dating again. That's a story for another podcast. But to cut a long story short, I met Adewale, and amazingly, a couple of years later, we married. Then 2 months shy of our second wedding anniversary, tragedy struck, and I was at the office one day, nothing unusual in that, finishing off an early morning conference call with colleagues in China. And as I removed my headset, I noticed a missed call from Adewale on my cell phone. So I returned his call. But when I heard his voice, I froze. His speech slurred as if he was drunk, but it was only 8:30 in the morning. And I could barely make out his words, yet I knew he was in terrible trouble. So I packed up my things, got back in the car, and literally raced home. And what I discovered when I arrived home is that Adewale had suffered a life-threatening stroke that day. And this was only the start, really, of a series of setbacks and a long road to recovery. As the weeks turned into months and our lives became more and more controlled by the now frequent hospital visits that were keeping him alive, essentially. Suffice to say, it was a harrowing experience and one that got us both thinking, because Adewale's business suffered without him, and I had to go back to work whilst my husband was still in recovery. So it's a bit of a juggling act. And then we just had to figure out that there just has to be another way. So we decided that together we would explore some of those new ways of working. Some of those new ways of working that you hear the youngsters talk about, and making money online, building an internet-based business, and so on. And our life circumstances really forced us to think differently, to act differently, and to ask different questions, basically. We had to pivot. This is how we got into building a business, leveraging the internet to sell products and services to customers. And suddenly we found ourselves blown away by the unlimited opportunities before us, almost like children in a sweetie shop, actually gulping at jars of gobstoppers. I attended live events in the UK and in the US and Canada to learn about online marketing, or in other words, how to sell products and services using the internet, whether these were our own or other people's under license. So we started with an online store using the Shopify platform. And in the beginning, it was with mobile phone accessories, until I worked out that the niche I was more comfortable with was with artist materials. And so that's how e-commerce came to our attention and our journey began.
Okay. So it's quite a change. You've always gone from purchaser to salesperson, although be it in an electronic way of doing things. And it's something that obviously kind of suited your new perhaps position in life, after having this very difficult period of time. I'd like to explore a little bit you mentioned Shopify, I believe, is the store. Can you dive a little deeper into this, from your steps into the platform and then right through to your fully functioning store?
Sure, yes, it's interesting observation. Yes, it's having been in procurement for most of my working life, to be on the other side of the conversation in sales. It's you're right, it was a switch. Sure, I first learned about e-commerce and Shopify in a masterclass in London, and at that time the drop shipping model was all the rage. And in case you're wondering what drop shipping is, it's a retail fulfillment method where a store doesn't actually keep the products it sells in stock, but instead, when a store sells a product using the drop shipping model, it then purchases the item from a third-party wholesaler and has it shipped directly to the customer. And as a result, the seller doesn't have to handle the product directly, nor incur the cost of buying the stock in advance and paying for warehousing. So there are some advantages there of not having to buy stock and hold that and pay for that upfront. So that appealed to me because that was very much in alignment with the procurement and supply chain side of the equation. And then platforms such as Shopify make it possible to create a visually appealing store with your products, and you can list those and have those live within a matter of hours. So I figure if I can do it, anybody can do it, literally. And then what you need to do is make prospects and potential customers aware that you exist and entice them with your offers. That I'm sure we could spend another hour in and of itself, Dave, talking about how you get customers to your Shopify store, or any store for that matter. It's the art of the offer and really understanding your niche and what appeals to people. And similar to professional procurement practices, though, there is an end-to-end process to be aware of and to embed in your Shopify business. And in my experience, this key point tends to be a miss from some of the folks who teach this topic. So there's a section in my book, in chapter 4 actually, that speaks about e-commerce and drop shipping and the pros and cons, actually. Like, as with everything, there's always an upside and a flip side. And in addition, I can share the following advice for listeners who may be interested in going down this route, perhaps. So the first thing really I would advise is to think strategy. So, and based on my experiences, that's why I advise this, because stepping into this platform and business model is really important, just to start at the beginning, which might sound obvious, but again, it's quite often skipped over when you listen to online classes about this. It's really important to do the research on a potential niche, and also to think about your store name, and importantly, the store branding. These all work together. So consider how you want your customer to feel when they experience you, your business, or your products. What's the feeling you want to evoke? Because the competition is really high online, and there's lots of distraction, competition, all sorts of things. So what is it that you want your customers to tell their friends? And if you're unsure what I mean by that, think about the John Lewis Christmas TV ad campaigns of any given year as an example. For me, these ads are the best example of connecting with your customers on an emotional level. They're always memorable, and you always remember them. Other examples may resonate better with you, perhaps, but probably you can see what I mean. It's about the connection and the story. And this is such an important concept, that's the concept of branding and that connection with your customer, that's an entire chapter in my book in and of itself. But here's the thing though, the reason why I suggest getting your strategy and branding on point is simply because most online shoppers these days are pretty savvy. And if anything, and it could be the slightest thing, seems off, people will simply leave your site immediately and you'll never know why. And this is referred to as your bounce rate. And once people bounce, they are unlikely to return to your site. Well, there are techniques such as managing abandoned carts within with Shopify apps. And there's some advanced strategies such as retargeting that you can deploy, where you may be able to recover some visitors, but of course, if you're a new store owner, you may not have sufficient site data to do that yet, or you might be unable to invest in those strategies just yet. So part of defining your store strategy is to think about what you need to have in place at the outset. And this is where supply chain thinking comes in really handy, because we're used to thinking end to end. So have a strategy that strikes the balance between upfront investment. So for example, investing in your domain name, the Shopify store itself, etc., and being able to acquire customers profitably. And to achieve the latter, you can choose to do this by organic reach, so by word of mouth or referrals or methods like that. Or you may need to leverage social media a bit differently by including paid advertising campaigns as part of your scaling up strategy. And of course, you need budget set aside for that to do so. Secondly, think about standards or compliance, or also known as the rules that control the fun. But these are really important on the online store spaces, because compliance to the rules has to be demonstrated from the merchant perspective, because you want to be seen as an ethical and law-abiding business, someone that's real and someone who treats their customers with care. And there are data protection laws to be aware of. That is, you must be transparent how you collect and store customer information and for what purposes. And usually this is on a website in sections such as your terms and conditions, terms of service, privacy policy, these kind of things, little links at the bottom of the website. And Google can see this. So if you want your store to rank well and be Google friendly, standards are really important to know about and comply with. And other rules to be aware of are those associated with your social media accounts and merchant or business accounts that are set up for the purposes of running paid advertising campaigns. So because social media and search engines work together with your Shopify store, it's really important that you follow these rules, unfortunately. I mean, as I said at the beginning, rules control the fun, but they're there for a reason. So it makes you look like a proper merchant and a responsible merchant. And also Google can see that customers are going to be safe in your space. So make sure you do comply, find out what they are, all the rules for merchants and business accounts, because if you don't and you think, oh, I'll read those later, oh yeah, I can see that, I'll get to that, but then you carry on, what will happen is you can find yourself in a situation where your social media business accounts, so if you're running paid advertising, they'll just get shut down and you won't get any warning about that. And that could have really serious implications to your business pipeline, especially if you are fairly reliant on paid advertising to generate new business. So you need to be prepared with a contingency plan so that you can mitigate this risk and ensure your business operations continue. So I strongly advise a compliant, secure website, because if it's compliant and secure, it gets shown to more visitors in Google searches and other SEO options, not just Google.
Of course, yeah.
And then thirdly, I would say sourcing, and buyers out there will know what I mean by that. This is the strategy for where is your stock going to come from? So I mentioned in the beginning, it's not that you're buying stock up front, hoping that you'll sell it. You acquire the stock once you've got a customer order. But even so, there are many options of how you can acquire that stock, or those products, I should say. So when it comes to deciding what products to source and sell, do your homework like you would in any other scenario. What are the options? Where can you go? Is it in this country? Is it overseas? And all these number of things that would go through your mind still applies to an online business. And use analytics tools and other online resources to help you. Researching and sourcing products to sell is the fun part, though. I think there's various ways that you can do that, and you can use social media to help you. Of course, can look for things in all sorts of places that you perhaps wouldn't expect. There's Facebook is one source, Pinterest and YouTube are other sources. But think about your customers and their needs first of all, I would say, so that you can work out how you can position the products to them.
Yeah,
In terms of...
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously what people got to remember is that if the supplier doesn't perform, then you don't perform, basically.
That's right.
So you haven't done your due diligence and made sure they are dispatching the goods as promptly, should we say, as they ought to, then your customer will be on to you, not the supplier. Basically, you are the supplier in this case. I think people can easily forget that in this sort of scenario. They think, okay, an order's going to pop through and it will immediately be on the magic post and be there a few days later. Not quite the Amazon model, though, is it? Drop shipping, depending on where it's coming from.
That's so true. Yes, due diligence is a key part of this, and a lot of store owners in this space can overlook that point. Exactly. It's like, yes, you, as far as the customer is concerned, it's all on you. So if the product arrives damaged, or it doesn't arrive at all, or something goes awry, as can happen sometimes, you have to be you have to take responsibility for that, even if you're not sure what actually happened. It's like, don't argue about it. Keep the customer at your at the center of your attention to rectify that. And It's so true. I can think of two stories around this, actually, just quickly to illustrate these points. I had one lady who contacted me because her it was some paints that she got. They arrived damaged, and so she took a photo, emailed in, and said, "I'm not happy with this. It's arrived damaged." So I responded immediately and said, "That's fine. A replacement will come out to you." And then I figured out, how do I do that? I think the important thing is to manage customer expectations first, and then work out how soon can I get a replacement to her.
Yeah.
And fortunately, that didn't take too long to resolve. And then I heard a short while afterwards, the replacement had arrived. Absolutely no problems at all, and luckily all was well. And she said, "Oh, thank you so much for doing that. That was more than I expected you to do." And I thought, okay, good.
That's right. And that word of mouth is obviously good as well for your reputation, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And also be aware in this space, in drop shipping, something else that quite often comes up is you've got competition. And so other people could be selling what you're selling. They might not be going about it in quite the same way, because we all have our own style of doing that. But they could be similar products. And I did have a case one time where somebody was saying on my business page in Facebook about what a terrible service that this company offers. I'm trying to get in touch with them and nobody's answering, all this kind of like a rant post that you quite often see on social media. And I thought, that's really weird. I do not recognize that name. And of course, in the back end of Shopify, you can see the record of people who have bought from you, and you can see their names. You've got a customer database in there. And I contacted her separately to say, "I'm sorry you've had a bad experience." I said, "I can't see that you placed an order with me, but if somebody in your household did, or if it went through on somebody else's name, please just send me the details and we'll sort this out." And it turned out her order wasn't with me, as I suspected. But in addition to that, there was another lady who stopped by on the same feed and said, "I think you've got the wrong company. My experience of ordering from this store was fabulous, and I couldn't have been happier." So it's funny how on the same social media feed, I didn't actually have to say anything. Somebody else had defended the reputation of the store for me.
Well, that's fantastic, isn't it? That's great for somebody to stand up for you like that. That's an unusual phenomenon, I would have said. That's really nice.
Yes, it really was. It did take me by surprise, and yes, it's good. So when you, and that's why it's important, even if you don't know all the answers to running a Shopify store, especially in the beginning when it's new, it's just put your corporate career hat on, really, in some ways, and think, okay, how would, if I was them, how would I want this resolved? So if you try and serve from the highest integrity, first of all, it's keep those communication lines open, because quite often people get frustrated because they don't hear anything, or nobody acknowledges that they've sent in a message or an email. So always acknowledge, figure out how you're going to deal with that and resolve it afterwards. But make sure you do. Always got to follow up, and that's important. So yeah, and then I think, so where did we get to? We had strategy, we've talked about standards, sourcing, and then lastly, really, it's about studying your results. What happens when you put your store live? What happens when you run an ad? All these sorts of things, because it's quite scary in the beginning. And if your client acquisition strategy includes paid advertising, then you really must study the data you get once the campaigns are running. Because if you ignore these, you do so at your peril, because anything could happen. So you need to watch it like a hawk. You want to test your offers and fail fast. And what that means is, if I'm selling a particular paintbrush set and I think that looks like a good deal, or that's the most amazing thing since sliced bread, that's not what's really important. It's what my market tells me. And so if that offer falls flat on its face, it means my niche and my customers in that niche don't think that's particularly amazing. So that's what I mean by fail fast. Put your offer out there, test it, and if there's no reaction, move on. Don't attach any emotion to that. Really, it's just a test. Just think of it, it's a test. And that way you find out what works before burning through your ads budget.
Right.
And
you mentioned about ads, then I guess for people who've never done this kind of thing before, the thought of an advertising budget may be a little bit scary in itself. But I understand you can advertise for relatively low cost. Isn't that correct?
You can start doing little tests from as little as £10 a day. And there's various ways you can do it. You can just cap a campaign budget. And so say a campaign runs for 2 weeks or something, you can cap the budget at, I don't know, say £100 for the sake of argument. And then what platforms such as Facebook would do is work out how to allocate your budget over the period of your campaign. So, but yes, just to get started, if you just want to do a quick little test and run it for a few days, my advice is to run it for at least 3 days, because you want to collect some data with your budget and see what happens. But yeah, run it for a few days on a low budget and you can get started with something.
Yeah, I guess you could try out different ways of campaigning and, as you say, see the results and see which one works the best. And then the rest of your budget, I guess, put into the one that is the most successful.
Essentially, that's the idea, and that's how you can scale up. So each campaign that you do, you would test different targeting. So you could pick a different audience demographic, location, interest, or you could test out, would this graphic or this video would a graphic of your product or a video of your product work better and get a better response? Well, nobody knows the answer to that till you test the two. So those would be two different ad campaigns. Test the picture and then test the video. But of course, what you don't want to do is amend too many variables each time you run a ad campaign. So there's a strategy even within that. How do you do that? Because if you tweak and test too many things in the one campaign, you don't know then which one worked.
Yeah.
And then it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, drives you nuts. But that's again all part of the fun of delving into running businesses online, I think. And there's so many things to get comfortable with.
Yeah.
And it's all and most of those things are around testing and tweaking and getting into a regular cycle of doing that, actually. And it can be hard because for most of us it's your own hard-won cash or hard-earned cash that's behind the budget, paying for this. So you have to be careful, because it's not like you've got the multiple hundreds of thousands ads budget at the beginning. You have to start small.
Yeah.
So as you say, Dave, for sure there are techniques to learn to help you set up those campaigns in the first place, and then learning how to interpret those and then adjusting them, because it's very rare that the first campaign that you put out there is a overnight success.
Yeah.
Very rare. It can happen.
If only, eh?
Yeah, but I think these are for the super advanced, very experienced people who've been doing this for a number of years. So when you're first learning, for sure, don't beat yourself up over this, because it is a learning curve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I don't know, is a perpendicular line a curve? I'm not sure. It's a very steep learning curve.
That's right. I think people get too hung up on what they perceive as failure. It's a learning experience. So they just found out what doesn't work. So they should see that as a success, I think.
Absolutely. The worst thing you can do is do nothing, isn't it? I'm sure I'm sure you realize that, a test is just an experiment, and it's just that these experiments quite often require a bit of investment to find out what works and what doesn't work. And so that running experiments is, you're going to get a result, but then you don't know what that result's going to be. And so, as you say, you're learning something because you're testing, and a testing gives you a result, and you only get the result because you're trying something new and you're doing something. So you're only going to know by doing it. And yes, eventually, as you say, you can't beat yourself up. It's just testing, because nobody really knows at the end of the day what's going to win the hearts of customers.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So many moving parts there.
Yeah, that's right. So if we consider then this is an online lifestyle, that I think leads nicely into your award-winning book. You've called it The Online Lifestyle, with 53 prosperity steps to transform your life and elevate your success. So would you mind painting a picture of what one could discover in this book? What sort of things would you see, and talk us through it a little bit?
Sure, yes. It does speak to, I think, my procurement operations / project management brain, because I, after finding myself in this new world of online business, I just noticed so many things. And the first few events and training webinars and so on that I attended, I just noticed that there was just like these big just data dumps of information. And it seemed to me that there was no particular order that any of it needed to be done in. And maybe there still isn't, I don't know, but my brain doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So as I began noticing how much I shifted, because I was learning and growing and testing and failing and getting results, some were good and some were not so good, it was just interesting what I observed along the way. And in the beginning, I was the stranger in a strange land when it came to online business and digital marketing, until over a period of time, I realized somehow I'd embraced it and it no longer felt strange. And it was all the other stuff that then felt a bit odd. So heading in the new direction, it definitely was exciting. And I'm somebody who's a lifelong learner and just interested in tons of things. I'm always asking questions. And this was another area where it's like, well, how does that work? Oh, what do they mean by that? What does that mean? So there's lots to learn, as we were saying before. And so I've always had lots of ideas and questions, more than I have answers. And as you can tell, that much hasn't changed. But my thinking and approach to it has. And also I noticed that when I was talking to other people about my ventures, especially those used to corporate environments like me, that it was hard figuring out how to go from corporate to entrepreneur without taking reckless risks. And then I figured, if I take and consider everything I've learned, what were the steps? What did I actually start with? What was that step one? And then what did I do? And then what did I do? And so that's how I got the inspiration to write the book. I thought, well, what if I create the framework that I figured out of all the steps that I took just to get, it sounds a lot, 53 steps, but they're mini steps. There's sort of what I would call micro steps, mini steps, and achievable and doable over a series of days. And so creating a framework was, I felt, important to get clarity for myself, but also others were asking me questions about it. So I thought, if I can teach others who are interested in this to also equip themselves to be their own bosses and start something new, how awesome would that be? And I was making the notes anyway. So then I thought, well, I may as well put it in a book. And so for anybody who may not know exactly how to do that, and who are curious how to monetize their talents and skills leveraging the internet, then I think this will be an interesting read, because it's all written from personal experience. It's not about, I've heard this idea, sounds amazing, this is what I've heard. It's actually written from doing the doing. So it's not pie in the sky theory. And so the book teaches people how it is, not how it should be. And the reason for that is because I wanted it to be realistic and to the point. And also I know that people who are in corporate and who may have little things on the side, on the go, or who want to actually start their own business in the end, you can't just ditch a corporate job because that's your main point of income, possibly for many people. And if you've got a family relying on you, and a mortgage to pay and all the usual commitments in life, you can only do it in stages. So that was another reason why I wrote the book in stages, so that you can gradually chip away at it and learn and put some solid steps in place to help you achieve that goal. And so in the book you can discover that a corporate career is not the only option. I think many people realize that, but what's not so obvious is, well, how do you do that? And so I talk about the avenues you can pursue to both supplement and completely replace your income, and how you can transform your life and achieve the things you want and deserve without taking those reckless risks. And so I hope that by documenting my story and the reasons why I started it, what prompted me to pivot, the mentors I had, the training I invested in, and all of that is in the book. So no matter who you are or what your current situation is, my intent is that the book is crammed full of insights and practical advice about the online lifestyle that you can learn and put into practice.
Oh, that's really good. And these people say, as you said, they know that you've done this, you put it into practice, and you've got some great results. So yes, I have a copy, and I have read through the copy, and I am very impressed. I'll have to get you to train me in how to write a book now. It's quite exciting.
Oh, wonderful. Happy to.
I understand Adewale, he's also published books, and he's also award-winning as well. Can you tell us about the books that he's done quickly, and how that helped you, perhaps inspired you to take the same journey?
Yes, sure. It is funny. I was laughing with somebody the other day saying we don't have matching anoraks, but we do have matching award-winning books, which is quite funny. But that's right. Yes, he is. And in fact, we share the same book coach and publisher. And Adewale published his first book in 2018. And that's called Creative Endeavor for the Logical Mind: How to Go from Engineer to Entrepreneur. And this book speaks to pivoting, because he talks about how he had to pivot his business, how from his perspective, his experience of learning, in his words, I shall add, learning the fluffier marketing side of the world for somebody who's, very technical and mathematically driven from the engineering world. So he talks about that and his experiences of learning that after a prolonged period of ill health. And so that's a book that's full of practical tips for navigating the online business world too. And not only he didn't stop there, he went on to write a second book. And this one is an interesting story as well. We were at a spiritual retreat, and we were in the swimming pool talking to others. And I remember turning around to him and saying, well, what if you write a book about that? I said, you could call it The First and Only. And so he wrote a book called First and Only: Powering Up Your Mindset for Transplant and Living Sickle Cell Free. And that speaks of his incredible story of how he mentally prepared for this life-changing procedure. So after he suffered his strokes as a sickle cell patient, as he was then, that that posed a threat to his life, really, and he could have had another one which could have killed him. So it was important that we found out other options to keep him alive, essentially. So yes, that's the story of what that's about. And this is an unusual procedure, and so that's what makes it an interesting story.
Absolutely. It's quite amazing what he's been through and how he's powered his way through the other side. As you say, it's all about mindset and how you get your head around things, how you get your focus, perspective, and really move things forward. So it's incredibly
That's
impressive what he's achieved, and yourself, of course.
Thank you.
Now, you haven't stopped there. You keep forging ahead, and you now offer clients consultancy, coaching, and training. So, can you talk about your latest work and walk us through the online business educator course, your coaching offer, and the Power Hour?
Yes, I can. You're right. It does. I keep powering through and just finding new ways to help people. And yes, so those are some ways that people can work with me. The Power Hour is a 60-minute strategy and coaching session, and clients can book those to tackle how to overcome a particular online business obstacle. An example is planning an effective Shopify store, coming up with the strategy for that. It could be starting a business online as a service provider. So, for example, how could you translate skills and talents from a corporate career into a service provider and setting that up online as either as a service provider or a coach yourself. You could book that to talk about how to develop a brand, and that's particularly useful, I found, this year for new business owners, as well as some potential pitfalls to avoid around branding. So there's just a few examples there of what the Power Hour can do, and the idea really is to help people remove mental blocks and just move through those obstacles. And sometimes it's just helpful to have an accountability partner. Sometimes we know what it is we need to do. It's just a bit too far outside of our comfort zone. And sometimes you just need that support to help you get there.
Yeah.
So it can be used for that as well. And I have helped small businesses with their copy for social media as well, because people find it useful to get actually just a different perspective. How do others, on their copy and how people see their products and services. And so that's useful either for posts or for ad campaigns. And so essentially, the Power Hour is a short, sharp burst of inspiration and actionable ideas to get clients unstuck. Mm. And from that, I developed the online business educator course, because as I was saying earlier, when you start testing out ideas and you test with some clients and you help build and create new ideas. So then came along the online business educator course, and that's a step-by-step course. So you're noticing I do like the step-by-steps, because I find that works well for teaching people how to start. And particularly when it's around online business and doing that from scratch, because you just don't know what that is from having an office job to suddenly switching your brain to online necessarily. Mm. And so this approach works particularly well for beginners or career changers. And my teaching is based on real life experience, like the book. And so there is some of the material from the book in the course, but just in a bit more in depth, plus my insights from my professional career as well. So it's through the lens of what I know as a supply chain professional throughout my procurement career. So there's all sorts of tips and tricks that come in here that are handy. And so clients have access to that, and they have access to my mentors in a way, because everything I learn from my mentors comes through in everything that I do to help the clients. And it's a way for clients to have accountability too, so that they feel supported, which is really, really important in the beginning, because so many of these courses online, and you watch a series of videos, and then you're left to figure out and hope that you get the result that
Yeah.
um, uh, that is advertised or offered, and sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. And so what I noticed for myself in my experience is that if I had more support, I had more success. So that's why I built that into that. And then there's the online business educator program, and that's really a deep dive immersion. So that's a longer program, and that's geared up for clients who have perhaps already started an online business, or who have made some headway, and maybe who want to now optimize or scale up their business. So I can help with that. And clients get access to my entire toolkit of online business and branding strategies, and partnered with mindset techniques and success principles.
Okay.
And the reason I include that is because having learned from my experience, you need that. You need the mindset technique to help you get through the good days and the bad days. keep plowing through it.
Yeah. Certainly reading so your book, I do like the approach of a step-by-step approach, and you effectively holding the hand of the person as they take their journey. From a manufacturing background that I've had, I'm used to structure, SOPs. You optimize the way of doing things, and everybody, when they're first starting out, would refer to those documents to understand how they should go about this, and then as they gain an experience and confidence, then they can reevaluate those SOPs and develop them and improve them and make them even better. So I really think that's a great approach. I've listened to many online courses and presentations, and they all talk about the headline news, should we say, but never tell you really how to go about it and do it. So I think it's a much better way of helping people truly go from A to B.
Oh, thank you for the insight, because that's certainly the intent. And I think because we've got a similar background, and I'm also used to SOP heavy environments,
Yeah.
that for me is that was my intent, to help people in that way. And also, as well, I remember one of my early marketing events that I went to, it was all about traffic and sales funnels. And I thought, well, I know what a funnel is if I need to put oil in the car, but I don't know what they're talking about here. And
Yeah.
I was like confused from the
Yeah.
outset. And I thought, there has to be some run up steps to this.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Okay. Now, you've mentioned a few times about people who have helped you in your journey, perhaps those thought leaders. You talked about courses and books and so on and so forth. So if you were to recommend any books or any of the people or courses that inspired you in your journey, which
Mm.
ones would sort of stand out? Would you choose and say, okay, this is one of my preferred? What effect did it have on you? So what would you be in your, say, top 3 or something?
Gosh, that's a really good question. There's a ton of books and tons of people who are inspiring in this space. And so, yes, well, many of the books I read are nonfiction, I must say. And because I love learning, and because I love reading inspiring, motivational, or impactful books that reinforce the message that everything is possible and nothing is fixed, I think those ones particularly pique my interest. And I think one of the toughest challenges that one faces along a path that's going to change the status quo is mindset. So I'll come back to that again, really, because it's so important to understand what thoughts and behaviors are required of you as you grow, so that you can set yourself up for success and continue being successful. So you've got to understand what's going to get you there, as well as keeping the momentum going. And as Napoleon Hill once said, both poverty and riches are the offspring of thought. So it's really important to realize how powerful your thinking is, and the choice is yours which way you go. And actually, that's one recommendation. I remember that being recommended to be my mentor in the early days, and it's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And although that book's been in circulation for decades, I think it was written in the 30s originally, it still teaches valuable lessons that are still relevant in today's society. That was really impactful, all about how you think and make the changes in life that you want to. I'm particularly inspired as well by Jack Canfield's story, and he's a well-known success coach in the US and a New York Times best-selling author himself. And he's written many books, but the one I like is The Success Principles: How to Get from Where You Are to Where You Want to Be. So this is my second recommendation for the listeners. And I'm also studying these principles in more depth myself on one of Jack's programs. So my education continues. My fascination with all this will never stop, I think. You really do you just never stop learning and growing. And as I mentioned before, each time you level up, and you know what I mean by that. Your understanding shifts, or your perspective shifts, something happens. So that's a leveling up of sorts. And so each time you go through one of those, new thinking is required of you. You have to respond to the events that are happening in your life differently to get a different outcome, because if you keep giving the event the same response, you'll get the same outcomes.
Absolutely right.
So however, whatever those curveballs are, you have to learn how to respond differently. I'm not saying that's easy, by the way. It's takes practice, and it's a lifelong practice, I would say. But yeah, so you need to keep learning and practice these new habits, and you can only really understand what these are when you read from the gurus like Jack Canfield. It's a very readable book actually as well. So I recommend that, because it really hits home the saying that if you keep on doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always got. So learn how to change things up if you want different results. And lastly, I would recommend Robert Kiyosaki. And he is another American coach. He's from Hawaii. And his book, again, he's written many books, and the one I would recommend is Rich Dad's Cash Flow Quadrant. And for me, it's because it's really eye-opening how Robert Kiyosaki talks about money, wealth, cash flow, and really guides readers to understand the concept of financial freedom and what that really means, and how you can identify your path in life to help you achieve that. And what Robert Kiyosaki writes about is his life lessons of his two dads, as he calls them, that he had access to when he was growing up. And one dad was his best friend's father, and the other dad was his actual dad. And one was highly educated with degrees coming out of his ears, and the other was one was a highly educated man, and the other was a high school dropout. And one was poor and one was rich. In summary, a must read for anyone who wants to improve their financial literacy and financial intelligence. Or in other words, this is all the stuff they don't teach you in school. And it's like unlocking, it's like having the key to a padlock of a secret code. It's really eye-opening to understand financial matters in a more interesting way, based on these stories that he had, and also how he turned his life around as a result of what he learned. So those are my three.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I've certainly heard of Thinking About Rich. I heard of it and read it, and yes, I can certainly relate to your thoughts there. I've not read Robert's book. I've read Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's probably one of the most famous ones, and yes, he's still very prevalent in and on social media. I certainly see a lot of activity from him, Jack, that's one new for me, so I shall have to go and invest in that little one now. So thank you
Oh,
for that.
fantastic.
Uh,
Yes, no
yeah,
problem.
I've
Happy
really
to.
sort of immersed myself in a number of different people now. I think it's podcasting that has brought me, or brought my attention, should I say, to a number of different people. I
Mm.
really enjoy listening to a number of different guys now. One of which is a chap called Rock Thomas, and I've read one of his books. I think it's The Power of Your Identity, if I remember rightly. So that's one I would mention. I've actually been listening to his podcast today, and an avid listener to that. The one that's been quite a revelation actually for me. It was only the other night I was watching a film, and we're talking about the Wolf of Wall Street now, and I hadn't realised that the guy, I think it was Jordan Belfort, who was obviously the Wolf, had written his own book, and it was only through a quick Google that I realised that he had done that. And I'm reading my way through his book. I think it's called The Way of the Wolf, and that's absolutely fascinating. So at the moment, I haven't finished, but I'm nearly at the end. But it's one I've found quite interesting. So maybe worth having a little look.
Yes, I shall make a note.
Yeah, there we go.
That.
Thinking of motivation, are there things you regularly do personally that help to maintain your high levels of motivation?
Sheer determination, I think, is one. Just never give up. I think really it's about being selective in what I listen to. So to your point about listening to good podcasts or reading good books and watching helpful material, so for example, I tend not to listen to the news. I did get the memo that there's a global pandemic, I hasten to add.
You could miss that one.
Just so that the listeners aren't worried. But it's really important, though, not to let anything drop through your shell likes willy-nilly, because that can get you down in the dumps if you find yourself listening to the wrong type of thing. So I keep it upbeat, and I'm careful about what I listen, watch or read, and I prefer to consume content that will inspire or motivate or uplift me. So inspiring stories or tracks on your Spotify list that only you should hear, because that's your personal taste, and what gets you feeling good. And I don't care if somebody else thinks it's cheesy. It's just like, well, that's my motivation technique. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Sure.
And so I think that's important to me, and certainly my preference is to avoid listening to gossip.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. Did you? I certainly do it now and again. You think, okay, am I doing as well as I could do? Do you have the periods of self-doubt, or do you procrastinate now and again? And if you do, what do you do to lift yourself back out of that way of thinking?
That's a really good question, because yes, for sure, there are times when self-doubt creeps in and the inner voice makes its presence known, every now and then. And so to help that, it's always good to go back and remind yourself what your goals are and your affirmations to keep you on track. Just remind yourself why you started this thing in the first place, and just remind yourself. And then, as we were talking about before, I invest in self-education and personal development a lot, to understand why things like self-doubt or procrastination crop up in the first place. And is it normal? Does everybody else go through this? Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And by following mentors and following people like Jack Canfield, I can learn about the tools and techniques to help me handle the situation differently. So I think understanding what's going on is certainly a good start to learn how to get out of these little pockets of times when you're not feeling so great about what you're doing and why. And otherwise, when I'm feeling a bit off, I sometimes dip into my library of audio or video clips. So again, inspiring stories, or also or little clips from my mentors that they've sent on, that drop into my email box every now and then. And again, just hearing them and reminding yourself of certain things just gets you back on track. Another thing that I do sometimes is to remind myself of successes that I've already done, things I've already accomplished, so that I could see. There's a visual reminder I have in my office. It's a few sheets of paper stuck up on the wall, so I actually see the things that I was once unable to do, but I learned how to, and then I did it. So it's like, so these things once upon a time used to be difficult, until I learned how to do it, and I could break through the pain barrier and said, it's now an accomplishment. So I think that's important as well. Other times it's a question of just getting out in the fresh air. Sometimes you just need to go out in the sideways rain, or when it's blowing a hooligan, and just get fresh air into your lungs and get the blood pumping, whether it's a long walk or a bike ride, and just get out into nature. I'm lucky in that I live in a fairly rural part of the country, so surrounded by lovely country walks and farmlands. So sometimes I just go out for a walk, and don't know about you, but often I find that when I'm out and about and I don't have a gadget or a laptop in front of me, I find that my best ideas come to me when I'm out walking or in the fresh air, and then there's a fresh injection of new ideas, and that spurs me on again. It's like, oh good, I haven't run out of ideas, I could try this, I haven't thought of that before. So yes.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, get away from the high tech side and let your mind think. I quite agree. I personally have started, for some time now, doing short bursts of meditation, and I found that very useful to get my mind clear. And quite often I find soon after that little ideas will pop into my head that hadn't been there before. It just frees up some blockages now and again. I'm quite enjoying it, actually. Just
Oh, good.
10 minutes a day, something like that. That's all that's needed.
Yes, that's really good. I am to get to that point, Dave. So I take my hat off to you, because sometimes my mind, I start, and then I realize my mind is like the kitchen junk drawer upended on a trampoline, and it's like it's supposed to be quiet in there, and it's not, and it's like, oh dear.
Okay.
So,
No,
that's a work in progress for me.
Right. Well, I've actually mixed up my meditation with lying on something called a Shakti mat, which is something that's got little spikes on it. It's a bit like a bed of a nails, I think it's referred to. And
Oh wow.
at first you think, oh, blimey. But it's actually really refreshing. But have to look that one up for yourself and see what you think.
I will do. Yeah, I'm intrigued now.
There you go. Okay. Well, I know it's time's marching on, so I'll give you one more question just to test you out. Refer to top tips and techniques. Okay, let's see what we can have. Just thinking about people starting out their journey. They need to improve their confidence, performance, and happiness. So have you had any thoughts on those three subjects?
Yes, good question. And I think for confidence, one technique definitely that's helpful is the one I just mentioned, which is acknowledge your life achievements unapologetically. I know as Brits we're not great at blowing our own trumpet and being full on properly proud of what we've done, but it's such a great exercise to do. And all you do is you just sit down and just write a list of 100 successes you have achieved in your life already. When you start, you think, oh, I've got to 5 and now I'm a bit stuck. But actually, if you keep going, you'll be surprised, and then you'll actually get to 100 and think, oh, I could keep going. I could do a few more. And it's like, well, good, but 100's a good number, and it really gets you thinking. And what you find is that as you keep going through the list, you feel different inside. You feel bolder and more courageous somehow. And like I was saying before, these are all things that once upon a time in your life you didn't know how to do, like driving a car. There was a point in time when you didn't know how to do that, and then you learned, took the test, and then practiced the skill, and you can do it. And And a good technique is to, as I was saying before, print it out and stick it where you can see it, so that anytime you have a bit of a wobble or not feeling so peppy that particular moment, then look at your list and remember that's what you've already accomplished at one time or another. And if you think about it, you can have fear or you can have faith in life, can't you, really? And it's really important to have faith in your abilities to succeed, because you know what it takes to succeed. So we each have that success factor in us. We know what we do to get things done or pass exams or run a business or whatever it is. And really, both fear and faith require you to believe in something you can't see, if you think about it, both invisible. So if you've got a choice, I would say choose faith and belief, and that will also boost your confidence.
Right.
And for performance, well, there's the old adage, isn't there, that what gets measured gets managed, and that's more around the number crunching and stats.
Yep.
And results from testing, or as we were saying earlier, the numbers that you get from running your ads campaigns, that soon tells you how you're doing. And the important thing is to keep track of those. But the trick is to avoid those results becoming your master, because if you let the results rule you, you're toast, because then your focus is in completely the wrong place, if you think about it. So you're always going to remember that you stuffed up. You're always going to remember that you absolutely nailed it. So you commit that to memory. So just acknowledge the experience either way, learn from it, and avoid dwelling on any unsuccessful outcomes, really, because also what I've come to realize is what I might think is an unsuccessful outcome, somebody else doesn't necessarily see that as unsuccessful, and they don't beat you up about it. I think we're far tougher on ourselves in some ways, and we can be kinder to ourselves, and especially when it comes to measuring personal transformation. And by that I mean we all learn and grow at different rates and at different times, and some things resonate at a given point in time, and other times it just bypasses you completely. And it takes time. It's like any process. You have to give yourself time and be kind to yourself, and just notice how far you've come. And I think then, to answer the happiness thing, well, that's about recognizing and really appreciating everything you have in life already, actually. And I think 2020 certainly has been a year where perhaps many people have thought about this a bit more, where we're lucky we're just lucky with what we have. And including your own faculties of perception, determination or will, your imagination to be creative, and your memory and your intuition. I mean, all these things are important because this is what gets you through. These are the things that have got you to where you are, and the things that are going to get you to where you want to go to. And I think part of noticing what you're grateful for is just writing those out, whether it's in a notebook with a pen and paper type notebook, or an electronic version. That doesn't really matter, but just write out what you truly appreciate in your life, and acknowledge that you do have sufficient resources to provide the lifestyle you currently enjoy, and that you have it in you to reach your goals. I think people would probably be startled. And then if you want to enjoy different things in life, then you need to up level, and that's where the work comes in, whether it's emotional, energetically, physically, spiritually, because you need to be able to think bigger to achieve those bigger goals. And once you shift from, another part of this is, once you shift your thinking from material to meaning, and by that I mean thinking from the perspective of how I can serve others versus what can I get from others, then you're starting on the right track to a happier and more fulfilled life.
Good, lovely. That's very good. Thank you for those insights.
You're
So
welcome.
we've right about run out of time. So how will the listeners find out more about your work and how will they contact you?
For sure. Listeners can contact me and connect with me at www.julielawal, so JULIELAWAL.com. And I can be booked for interviews or to speak at your event at the same website, www.julielawal.com/contact. And actually, I also have a special gift for the listeners of the Real Life Buyer podcast.
Oh,
So if you go to www.julielawal.com/RLB for Real Life Buyer, you can grab your free PDF copy of my book. I am doing this because I want to help people who are worried about their jobs right now and are in need of inspiration or guidance, or maybe they need ideas for how to monetize their skills and prepare for thriving through these turbulent times. So that link again is www.julielawal.com/RLB.
very generous. Lovely.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. So I would say now, I do hope you, the listeners, have found these discussions very useful, have given you some food for thought in case you're considering working on your own self-development or undertaking a new or exciting direction in your life. So once again, Julie, thank you very much for your time, your insights and inspiration. And I look forward to seeing you again for a proper face-to-face catch-up one day.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
You never know. Hopefully
Yes.
2021 might be the year.
Fingers crossed.
In the meantime, best of luck with all your endeavors. It's been wonderful talking to you again. And I'd like to wish yourself and Adewale a wonderful time.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks very much. Take care and bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please subscribe and leave a positive review if you can spare a minute or two. If you would like to contact me, my email address is david@reallifebuyer.co.uk or find me at Real Life Buyer on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, where you're welcome to direct message me. I look forward to you joining me on future episodes. Take care and remember, save money and buy smart.